Okay, guys, it is as you can see, 10:30 right now, and I am about to I'm about to give you the lesson on how to write your conclusion. So just a couple of things. I'm sitting in my uh, living room right now with my dog asleep. He's snoring, so you may hear some dog snoring. And my daughter's 3 years old and she's asleep, and I have the monitor by me, so if she um, makes any funny noises in her sleep or starts crying, that's what's going on. So we'll see if that happens. But anyway, let's back on track now. Our goal today is to write a strong introduction, and or not an introduction, but a strong conclusion. Now, I might mess up and say introduction at some point because the conclusion and the introduction are very similar. Just like your introduction has three elements, so does your conclusion. And the three elements in your conclusion are almost identical to the elements in your introduction. In fact, they pretty much all three elements in your conclusion have the same function. It's just we name them differently and they're in a slightly different order. So, as you can see, the introduction had a grabber, an argument, and a preview. We called it the gap. Well, you'll notice right here in the conclusion, you have R's. You have an argument, you have a review, or a review, and a zinger. Now, I said that the three elements pretty much do the same thing, and this is how it works. Let's start with the argument. So the argument, of course, is the exact same thing that was in your introduction. It was the middle thing. It came after your grabber. In the conclusion, the argument is your first statement. And so here's an example of the argument we had in our intro. In The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, the protagonist Dorothy proves herself to be not only kind, but courageous. So that's our argument. We're saying Dorothy is kind and courageous. And there's many different ways to word it. And that's important because when you get to your conclusion and you mention your argument, it needs to be worded differently than how it was in the introduction. Imagine if your introduction and your conclusion had the exact same argument. What if this up here, what I just read, was in your conclusion? Would it sound proper? Would your essay sound good? You would get to that point, you'd be like, hey, I remember reading these exact same words just a few minutes ago. It's repetitive, it's boring. You have to change the wording, but you also need to state it again. So when you come down to the conclusion, you'll notice, first of all, I took out the title and the author because we already know who they are, or what the story is, and who wrote it. That's not important anymore. But I still have to change it up. I can't just get rid of the title and the author and then keep the same argument because it would still sound repetitive. So here's essentially the way we wrote the first argument. The protagonist, Dorothy, proves herself to be not only kind, but courageous. Well, down here we wrote, and you'll notice we have a transition phrase to conclude. Dorothy showed kindness and courage in her dangerous journey. So, same argument, but different wording. Down here, at the bottom, here's another way of wording it. Without courage and kindness, Dorothy certainly would have failed her quest. Just make sure when you state your argument, when you restate your argument in your conclusion, that it is worded differently than how it was in your introduction. Okay, the review is nothing new because it does the exact same thing as the preview did. So you had your gap, you had the P that stood for preview. In your conclusion, your review does the exact same thing as the preview, but just like in the conclusion, the argument is worded differently. you have to word your review differently from your preview. So you'll notice in the intro, my preview was, some ways Dorothy showed kindness and courage were by encouraging her friends, standing up to the Wicked Witch, and helping Oz. So my preview simply lists my claims, the claims that support my argument that Dorothy is kind and courageous. By the time I get to the conclusion, I've already argued how the claims support the argument, but I do want to restate them one more time. So one way you can reword it is by taking the list, and usually your list is going to either be at the end of the sentence or the beginning. Well, in this case, you'll notice in the intro, it's at the end. So pretty much all I did on my first example of rewording it was to move the list to the beginning. By helping Oz and her friends and defending the Wicked Witch, she was able to save the Emerald City from destruction. All right. So up here, some ways Dorothy showed kindness and courage were by encouraging her friends, standing up to the Wicked Witch, and helping Oz. Again, the list is at the end. I move it to the beginning over here. But of course, you can see I still change some of the wording. Because when you get to the conclusion, you've already argued your point. So the reader doesn't need as much background information. So when the reader doesn't need as much background information, you can use more the information you've already told them in the body. You can make more specific lists, and that's what I do down here. You'll notice they're very general up here, encouraging her friends. Well, down here I said her friends would never learn to believe in themselves. You see, now that the reader has already read the paragraph about how she encouraged her friends, which was to help them believe in themselves, I can list it more specifically at the end. Oz would have never returned to the circus. Instead of helping Oz, now I know how she helped Oz. And I can list it that way. And it's worded different. And the Wicked Witch would probably conquer the Emerald City, which of course is the specific way of saying standing up to the Wicked Witch. So the other way you can word it differently is by giving it more specific details when you list it. The final thing is the zinger, and it doesn't say zinger up here. It should have, but anyway, the zinger is going to connect to your hook. Your hook is going, and your zinger are going to connect to each other. So your hook comes full circle, and just like it hooks the reader's attention, the essay goes out with a bang, with a zinger. So notice up here, my hook is the quote that Oz gave. And it says, "You have plenty of courage, I am sure. All you need is confidence in yourself. There is no living thing that is not afraid when it faces danger. The true courage is in facing danger when you are afraid, and that kind of courage you have plenty." And then notice how I pick up where the quote left off in my zinger. Oz was right. Dorothy did have true courage. She faced many dangers such as death or the possibility of never returning home, but rather than quit, she stood up to the Wicked Witch and learned not only that she could defeat her, but if she believed in herself, had confidence, the magic she needed to return home was actually within herself. Here's another example. This is when I did the commentary on the thesis strategy for my hook. I defined courage. What is courage? Is a daredevil that walks on a wire hundreds of feet in the air courageous? What about the person that finds themselves caught in the middle of a tornado? For the purpose of this essay, courage will be defined as a difficult and dangerous decision to do something good and noble. Now, I connect to this hook with my zinger. Dorothy didn't have to be a reckless daredevil. Notice how I connect to the daredevil again. To stand up to the witch and help her friends. By believing in herself and doing what was right, She was able to discover the magic inside her to help a lot of people on the way. So again, talks about being how courage is good and noble, and right here we talk about how her courage is to do what's right. Final one. This is the strategy of the reader's point of view. A massive tornado has just passed. Your thoughts are scattered, your nerves still jittery. Then you remember your family. Are they okay? Did they make it to the storm shelter? You open your door and nearly fall over. What you are looking at is not your front yard, but a brand new colorful land, and it's filled with little people cheering and singing a funny little song that goes, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." Now, I connect to it by saying, and you'll notice how this was written in the reader's point of view. If you were in Dorothy's glass, should say silver, because in the book it was silver, and the movie it was ruby. I must have Cinderella on the mind. But anyway, if you were in Dorothy's ruby slippers, would you have displayed courage and found the magic that lies within? So again, it has the same point of view, which is um, second person point of view, where it's talking to you down here in the hook and in the zinger. So again, your concluding paragraph has a restatement, which comes first, then you review, and then you end with a zinger. So you open with a hook and you close with a zinger. I hope you understand the concluding paragraph at this point. Many students often take off their headphones. They look at me and say, "Mr. Potts, what do I do next?" Here's the answer. Write your concluding paragraph. Go back to your document and write your concluding paragraph. Be sure to restate the argument using different words from the introduction argument. Give a review where you list your claims, maybe do it in a more specific way, and then end with a zinger, which means connect, make it interesting, but connect the last sentence to your hook so that you complete your essay, that ends with a nice, um, I don't know, concluding sentence that connects to your hook, and it makes it feel complete.